So the day's finally arrived. This LP640 egear Roadster, one of 425. I'm going to convert it to a manual gearbox, and there's only 16 of those on the road. So I'm going to make a rare car even rarer, but in two ways. Hi, here we are at SB Race Engineering, Lamborghini Murcielago with a gear stick. I'm getting very excited, as you can see. Before we launch into detail of this manual conversion, let me tell you why I chose the Murcielago in the first place. Now, I see the period from 2000 to 2010 as the golden era of piston engine cars, because there's a bit of electronics, but they hadn't taken over, and you could still buy a manual version of most cars, including a V12 Murcielago Roadster, which to me is the biggest beast of them all. I mean, look at it. I mean, I remember seeing, I think it was Series 6 of Top Gear, and I do recommend you look back at it. Richard Hammond driving one of these, not an LP640, first Murcielago Roadster, 2005, and he drove it, he did the running with the bulls in the morning and driving one of these in the afternoon. And to me, that is the best car video of all time. I mean, it's sort of almost nostalgic now. It's not that long ago, 2005, but what a fantastic car video. Give Top Gear and Richard Hammond a due. You know, I still remember him saying, look at it, it's a missile. And it is a fantastic looking car, especially in roadster form. And my reasoning for getting a Murcielago over anything else, I wanted to get a car from that era, and I nearly bought a Ford GT, a 2005 car. Should have got it. I had put a deposit on it and I sort of bottled it at the last minute, and they've gone up, they've disappeared in price now. I can't afford them. This was always on my list, except I could only get an old example of an early Murcielago coupe, you know, and if I wanted a manual. And I really loved the Roadster, but I couldn't get one until I met Barry here at SB Race Engineering. They were doing the belts on my 355, and they were doing a Murcielago conversion to manual at the same time, and I thought, wow, you can do it. And Barry said, yep, you can, and this is the result. So I bought this from VVS down in Kent, who I think are fantastic Lamborghini specialists. 14,000 mile car, good price. I'm really pleased with it, really pleased. So it's been a year since I bought the car. Just want to talk you through the parts needed before you can even start doing the conversion. There are parts that you can't get now from Lamborghini. The main thing that I managed to get, which was my breakthrough part, was the tower that goes underneath the gear stick. There was a chap, Steve, at Driven Exotic in Gilroy, just south of San Francisco. I'd been talking to him about something else. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But he mentioned that a tower was available, and I managed to buy that and get it imported to the UK, and that really was my breakthrough. There was a lot of parts in that you could get, but there was some parts in there that you couldn't get from Lamborghini. Everything else we managed to get from Lamborghini, but not without really painstakingly going through everything, because I don't want anything on this car not to be as a manual Murcielago Roadster. So even the cowlings around the steering wheel, I don't want cutouts for pedals that aren't there. So really, I've had to go through everything and make sure we've got everything for the conversion. So finally, we got to the point where all the parts were ready, so the project could begin in earnest. And Barry got stuck in straight away. Now we say, oh, let's get the engine out first of all, but it's not straightforward lifting an engine out of a Murcielago. All the rear bumper, engine cover, all the ancillaries, water hoses, all the electric connections, everything has to come off first, which is a good few days' work, and then slowly but surely they can lift out that engine gearbox. It's all hands to the pumps at SB when they're lifting an engine and gearbox out of a Ferrari or Lamborghini, because it's such a massive lump. And you only have to scrape a chassis rail or a bit of bodywork, and you're creating a lot of damage and problems for yourself. So you need lots of eyes on it, and basically just very carefully just lifting it out. It's something they're so used to at SB, but it's still an incredible thing to see. And finally, engine and gearbox broken apart, and there you've got the gearbox on the bench, which is where the start of the manual conversion can actually start, because up to this point this is what would have happened anyway to fix my egear leak. This is just Barry showing you where the egear leak was. And that's the thing, look at that gubbins on the egear. That is so much complication. That was the reason why I didn't want a Lamborghini Murcielago egear in the first place, because it's expensive complication, and if it goes wrong, that's an engine and gearbox out every time. So this is simplifying a car so much to have a manual. It's not just making it a nice car and a rare car, it's making it an easier car and cheaper car to live with and more reliable. So all that e-gear gubbins is coming off. I'm keeping it all, everything that's to do with the e-gear, I'm keeping in a separate little case, so that one day in the future somebody might want to put it all back to an e-gear again. I doubt it, but you never know. But you know, for originality's sake, that might be the case in the future when everyone's converted their Murcielagos to manuals. I doubt. But anyway, all that's coming off, and this is Barry taking off the cover for the gearbox, which is the only bit that changes of the gearbox really, because that cover has a different interface for the e-gear, as the cover for the manual's got a slightly different input. The shaft comes in a slightly different place, so that's why that cover has to come off and a new cover goes on. It's pretty straightforward. Every one of these tasks looks simple in isolation, but the way that Barry can tackle them, to me, is incredible, because he's got it all in his head. He's built up the pedal box, that's all gone in, but again, it looks so complicated in bits. And even that tower, that bit that I managed to get from the States, that needed to be built up some more. And the last thing that I haven't mentioned yet, clutch release bearing. It was a bit noisy, only slightly, but I expected to replace the clutch release bearing, because you know, you've got an engine gearbox out and you're doing a clutch. You'd always look at a release bearing, because if it goes wrong, that's an engine and gearbox out again. So what was really painful though was that if this car had been 3 months newer, it would have been a VW release bearing, which was £400, but because it was still a Lamborghini Murcielago release bearing, £4,000. Now that hurt. That was something I wasn't expecting. I expected the clutch, which was for £5,000, but I already had that, but the release bearing was a bit of a kick, I must say. That wasn't something I was expecting, but had to be done. It would be daft not to. So there we are, engine gearbox back together. Incredible to see that linkage being used like that. I mean, that's just be able to sort of to move that gear stick and see the linkage working is fantastic. I'll never get tired of something like that. Now the last stage is obviously putting all this back in again. Barry had already drilled the hole. I was even worried about that. I thought, how can you be sure where that hole should be? But this is something that you get, a motor engineer knows what he's doing. They're not worried about that sort of thing, but it worried me sick. But apparently it was very obvious. Anyway, so drill the hole. There's Barry having a wave through the hole. Sounds a bit rude. And then the whole engine gearbox, again, the whole process, bringing everybody in to guide it back in. It's not something that is easy. And it's even harder with a gear tower now sticking up. All Barry's got to do is finish off some of the nuts and bolts, the heater pipes, water pipes, some of the wiring. And the last thing that's got to happen, Stuart, I think, is going to get the ECU upgrade sorted, which is something that it is different, because the ECU on the e-gear car has got things like the automatic blip when you go down a gear. You haven't got any of that with the manual, so that has to be a manual flash on the ECU, and then we'll be about there. And I can't wait, we'll be driving this car soon, and that'll be the next video. There's one more thing that I haven't mentioned yet, because it's early days, but one of the downsides of a Murcielago Roadster, well, the only downside as far as I'm concerned, is the roof is let's face it, it's pants. It looks terrible, it's hard to put up, and even when it's up, it leaks and it blows off if you do more than 100 miles an hour. It's completely rubbish. Just watch that Running of the Bulls with Richard Hammond again if you want to see how bad it is. It's terrible. And I've sort of sweated with this and think, how am I going to deal with this? And looked at the internet. There's probably about 10 attempts at a hardtop during that sort of 2005 to 2012. And most of them, well, all of them are terrible except for one. Steve at Driven Exotics in near San Francisco, down on the west coast of the States, did a hardtop for a customer that was absolutely spot on. And I've flown over to San Francisco, down to Gilroy to see Steve, and I've begged him for a hardtop. He wouldn't make one for me, but he's sold me his last pre-production prototype, which is a project, but I'm going to end up with a hardtop on this car that makes it everyday usable in the UK and lift off easily, and off you go. You've still got your Roadster. So I'm making a rare car, manual, rare, and making it even rarer. I can't wait for that. Stay subscribed, because I think you're going to like what I'm going to do with this car. I'm going to do it properly. SB Racing, where we are today, is the place to do this sort of work in the UK. They really know their Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and everything they do is spot on. I suppose with their race background it has to be, and that shows. You only have to look around this place to see the cars they've got here, that it just makes you realise I'm in the right place. Luckily I found them, luckily I found VVS as well, so let's see how we go with it, but stay subscribed, because this is just going to get better and better. Thanks for watching.